I'm just going to start by reciting one or two mantras of my own, and then we can begin. Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prasthaya, Bhutale, Shrimati Bhaktivedanta, Swamini, Namaste, Namaste, Saraswati Devi, Gauravani, Chani, Nirvishesha, Srinivadi, Pashchati, Om Jnana, Timirandasya, Kiranjana, Shalakraya, Chakram, Milikam Jena, Tasmai, Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayavirayat. Hare Krishna. So, the Mahabharata is a part of what is known as the Vedas. The Vedas are ancient Sanskrit writings, which are generally said to be 5,000 years old within the tradition, but they actually have much earlier origins than that. The word Veda means knowledge, and knowledge has no beginning. So if I was to say to you, 2 plus 2 equals 4, when did it begin to equal 4? You would say, well, it's always equal 4. Because that's knowledge, that's an eternal truth. So the Vedas are said to be of that nature. They contain truth which has no beginning, but it's written down from time to time according to the culture within which the Hare Krishna movement exists. The Vedic culture is called. We understand that these ancient texts, they're compiled by a person called Vyas. Vyasadeva, as he's also known, is said to be a divine incarnation. Krishna, I'm sure most of you know, but Krishna means the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna means the all-attractive person. It's a name of God, basically. And Krishna, he appears within this world, sometimes in his own original form as Krishna, famous, iconic, playing the flute, threefold form. He's actually dark, bluish in color, blackish in fact is said to be. Sometimes he appears in that original form. That's said to be the fountainhead of all divine manifestations, the original Supreme Person. But there are expansions of him that are called avatars that come to this world. One of whom is Vyasadeva. Now, he has a particular task of writing the Vedic literature. So he actually appeared last 5,000 years ago, roughly, give or take, and this is it's recounted how he came to compile the Vedas. So he's a great sage, and great sages, by virtue of their penance, their austere practices, have mystic vision. They can see things that we can't see. So he was meditating, and he saw in his trance, in his meditation, a vision of the future. And he could see the age in which we now live, which is actually called Kali, the age of Kali. Now that's not to be confused with Kali. Kali is the goddess. Kali, with the short A, is the age in which we now live, and that's said to be the dark age of quarrel, the iron age of conflict and hypocrisy. I think it speaks for itself. We can see the truth of that, unfortunately. So Vyas, he saw that. He sat down, he meditated, and then he saw this terrible vision of people suffering in the future, and he could see that, that they would be in great distress and difficulty. So, out of compassion, he compiled the Vedic knowledge. Now, the Vedic knowledge, as I was saying, it consists of eternal truth. Now, the truths that it's dealing with are pertaining to the absolute. To understand who we are in truth, who is God, and what is our relationship with Him. So the Vedas deal with that specifically. They have a whole plethora of other subjects. Some of you may be familiar and have heard of them, the Vedas, and know that actually there's Vedas which deal with all kinds of sciences. But the central theme of the Vedic knowledge is to understand the absolute, and to understand who we are. One understanding the Vedic assumption of the Vedas, the basic premise is that we are different from the material bodies in which we now reside. This material body is a temporary thing, as we know. It had a beginning, it has an end, but we, the person within that body, we do not. We have no beginning, we have no end. You can understand this by a little contemplation. If we think how we can see the body is changing, we have now the body of an adult. Previously we had the body of a child. We'll have the body of an older person. Eventually the body will cease to be. And it will become dust, become ashes, or whatever. But we, the person, are the same. We can think back and remember that I was a child. I can remember when I was a young man. And I can now see that my body is different. But I know I'm the same person. There's a constancy there. That is the self. Throughout those various changes, I'm able to observe the changes because I'm different from them. That means I'm something other than this body. You see things changing, that means you're not part of the change. You can observe it. So this is the first understanding of the Vedas, that we are eternal beings, different from the body. So that is the knowledge that Vyasadeva wanted to convey in compiling the Vedas. So, and the Mahabharata, because he's also the author of the Mahabharata and the Puranas. These are different books that Vyasadeva has written down. Puranas means histories. I'll mention those a little more in a second. And Mahabharata, I'll mention a bit more about that in a moment. But first of all, why he wrote them. Because of this vision and because of his compassion, because great sages, great saints, they're very compassionate by nature. They don't like to see the suffering of others. They want to ameliorate, they want to do something about that. So, and the best thing you can do to help a person is give them knowledge. Knowledge destroys ignorance. Ignorance is the cause of suffering. Ignorance causes our suffering because, just like we know that. Why do we go to school? Why do we go to college? Because we need knowledge. Because if we don't have knowledge, we will suffer in our life. We won't be able to get a job. We won't have any money. We won't be able to get by. We won't know how to do anything. So obviously, we need knowledge. But what is that knowledge which destroys all suffering at its root? The knowledge of technical things like, this is data, actually, it's information. Information is not knowledge. What we learn in college now is just information about so many things. But knowledge is that which destroys suffering. So that knowledge which destroys all our suffering is knowing who we really are. We suffer because we don't know who we are. We think we're something we're not. We think, I am this body. So because we think that, we try to satisfy the body. We try to enjoy the senses of the body. But because we're not this body, that doesn't satisfy us. We're trying to make ourselves happy by feeding or decorating or making comfortable the external vehicle. It's like polishing your car and looking after it very nicely, but forgetting to eat your meals. The car's beautiful, it's shiny, it's nice, and you're gradually wasting away because you're not the car. So it's like that with the body. We're doing so many things. Everything, our whole Western civilization is based upon this faulty assumption that we are this body. So it's resulting in a great deal of problem, of conflict, of unhappiness, because we're thinking the resources of this world are what I need. That will make me happy. If I can get more, I can have more. And this person wants what I want, so I have to fight him. And that person's trying to get what I've got, so I have to fight him as well. So in this way the conflict arises, all based on this mistaken assumption that we are this body, which we're not. So Vyasadeva, well aware of this truth, as a powerful divine sage, thought, and seeing that people in the future would not understand this, they would be just caught up in the externals, decided to compile the Vedas. I must write down these Vedas so that people can get this knowledge and thus destroy their ignorance, which is the root of their suffering. So he set about on this task of writing the Vedas, and it took him some time. Actually, prior to that, they existed in oral form. The Vedas traditionally were spoken. There's Sanskrit, so many different Sanskrit verses, and they were spoken, passed down from one teacher to his disciple, who then later became the teacher, passed it to his disciple. But as the age of Kali came in, Vyasa could understand that people's memories would become shorter, their ability to retain this knowledge would become lessened, they would not be able to do that. So he had to write them down. So he set about, he got out his pen. Actually it was, in those days they would write on palm leaves with a certain kind of sort of twig thing. So it didn't last very long, and it had to be copied, just like the monks, used to copy the sacred texts by hand, and they would that way be preserved. There were no printing presses or anything like that. So similar in those days, but it was written down and recorded 5,000 years ago for the first time. So as well as the Vedas, he wrote the Mahabharata, and the Mahabharata is actually a book of history. It contains different stories, but the central feature of the Mahabharata is the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is a treatise of knowledge, of spiritual knowledge. How many of you have read the Bhagavad Gita? Have you? So, most of you. Some of it, yeah. So you know what I'm talking about. So that's the central part of Mahabharata. But after he'd compiled all these Vedas, and including the Mahabharata, and also the Puranas. Puranas also are books of history, and they're stories, because Vyasa could understand that one of the best ways, of course, to convey knowledge is through the medium of stories, because we all like to hear stories about, kings and sages and mystics and gods. They're very like the Mahabharata is full of all those kinds of things. It's very colourful and very entertaining. People like that. But woven through also are the spiritual messages that he was trying to convey. and particularly the Bhagavad Gita, which was spoken by Krishna to Arjuna. So still, after having written all these wonderful books, he was still feeling a sense of dissatisfaction that something is missing, something is not right here. He felt that even though he'd done this great task. So as he was feeling that way, his spiritual master appeared before him, and his spiritual master's name is Narad Muni. Narad is another sage, and he is said to have such great powers that he can traverse the universe. He can actually travel by his mystic power from planet to planet. Sounds a bit far out, but actually, according to the Vedic understanding, there is life on other planets, on all planets actually, visible or not to us, it's there. So he can travel around, and so he came. He could detect also by his own power that Vyas was feeling this dissatisfaction, and he came to him. And what he actually instructed him to do at that time was to write another book called the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now the reason he did that was because he said, although you've written so many nice books, and that's well done for having done that, what's missing from there is that you haven't directly glorified God, actually. You've kind of gone around about it in an indirect way, like the Mahabharata. Krishna is there as one of the characters, but there are so many other stories and things surrounding that people can very easily get the wrong idea and not get the main message. The main message is to understand who we are and our relationship with God, with the absolute truth. So that, Narad explained, had not been fully delineated, not been clearly explained in the other books. So he compiled what is called the Srimad Bhagavatam. And I wanted to speak about the Srimad Bhagavatam a little bit because as well as having written the Mahabharata, I'm also currently embarking on, along with my good wife here, this is my good wife by the way.
Good wife.
The better half. Her name's Chintamani. So in collaboration with the better half here, we're writing the Srimad Bhagavatam in a similar style to the Mahabharata. How many of you read the Mahabharata? Any of you read the Mahabharata here? Okay, one of you. You'll be pleased to know there's a few copies available. So yeah, the Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is the again very much focused on this central understanding, this knowledge of who we are and what is our eternal relationship with God, and how we can awaken that, how we can realize that. Because when we realize that, everything else will become insignificant. Everything else will become, all our problems will vanish, will disappear. When we understand who we actually are, we don't have to do anything special. We don't have to become anything amazing. We just have to become who we really are. That means that we have to just drop the misconception of who we think we are. I'm thinking I am a man, I'm a woman, I'm old, I'm young, I'm black, I'm white, I'm English, I'm Chinese, I'm American, I'm Indian. But actually we're none of these things. What are these things? What are these designations? They're labels, aren't they? And are they permanent? They're not permanent. Can't be permanent, can they? I'm certainly not going to be a man forever. This body's not going to last forever. No one's going to be a woman forever. What were you before that? No idea. What will you be after that? No idea. Something different. It's just a label. I can say, well, I'm a Hindu. But that's another label. Tomorrow I might decide, I'm tired of being a Hindu. Let me become a Christian, and that happens all the time. Someone's a Christian and becomes a Hindu. Someone's, whatever. So these labels are not who we really are, but it's who we think we are. So, that this central point of knowledge and understanding this truth is inculcated, is given in Srimad Bhagavatam. It's also given in the Mahabharata and in the Bhagavad Gita, but it's taken to another level in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's said that it's such a powerful text, Srimad Bhagavatam, that after he'd written this book, Vyasadeva said that simply by hearing this literature, one's loving relationship with God will awaken just by hearing it. And as a result of that, the fire of lamentation, illusion, and fear will be destroyed. So these are the three things which he pinpointed as being the causes of our suffering: lamentation, illusion, and fear. Why are we lamenting? In this world, we lament. We hanker. First of all, we hanker. We want something. We want to have something, thinking, let me, improve, increase my happiness. But it fails to do that. Inevitably, whatever we get, whatever we have, doesn't matter how much we have, it fails to satisfy us. I was reading recently one famous comedian, his name's Jim Carrey, you've probably heard of him. He's now become a bit of a sage himself, sporting a big beard and things, and giving talks on spiritual topics. But he made a very good point when he said that I wish that everyone could, get all the money and all the fame and all the success that I've had, so that they could realize that this is not where it's at, that this is not going to make you happy. And here's a man who knows, because he's been there, he's had that, and it hasn't actually made him satisfied and happy. And there are so many cases of that. We can see by examining the lives of persons who have achieved this kind of thing. If we're aspiring for wealth, if we're aspiring for fame, if we're aspiring for followers and whatever, we should reflect on this, that those who've got it, are they happy? They're not happy. So this is the point that is being put across in the Vedas, in Srimad Bhagavatam especially, that we're trying for something that can't make us happy. The only thing that will make us happy is to awaken our eternal relationship with the eternal supreme person. We're all parts of that. We're parts of God, actually. We're little sort of sparks of the great fire which is the supreme. So we have the same qualities as him. And we have a relationship. Because he's a person, we're also persons. So two persons always have a relationship. Not always a nice relationship, but with God, it is a nice relationship. It's a loving relationship because he's our eternal Father. And he loves us. And his love is unswerving. It doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter, we don't have to be concerned that, I may have done something, he'll never have me back again. It's like the Father and the Son. The Son can do so many things, but the Father doesn't lose his love for the Son. Mostly. Of course, we live in an imperfect world. Sometimes that may happen. But of course, you know what I'm talking about, especially those of you who are fathers. The Son may do the most abominable thing, but the Father will still love him and think, I couldn't possibly have done that. There must have been a good reason. Something went terribly wrong. He'll understand the Son. So Krishna is the eternal Father. God is our eternal Father. He's always going to love us. We have that eternal relationship with him. And we just have to awaken that. And we can do that very easily by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. So we're lamenting, we're hankering after things which won't make us happy. When they fail to make us happy, we lament. Or if we fail to get them, we lament. So lamentation is a cause of disturbance, of distress, of unhappiness in our life. So this is one of the things that Vyas spoke about. How many of you here experience lamentation? Most of you, right? So you know what I'm talking about. How about fear? Anyone feel fear? This is the other thing he spoke about. Why are we fearful? We're fearful because we're not seeing the truth. We're not seeing reality. There's no reason to be fearful. Why not? Because we're eternal. We're indestructible, actually. There's nothing, like the Bhagavad Gita describes the soul. For the soul there is neither birth nor death, nor having once been does he ever cease to be. He is unborn, ever existing, primeval. He is not destroyed when the body is destroyed. He cannot be withered by the wind, burned by fire. He can't be drowned in water. He can't be cut. Nothing can be done to the soul because the soul is not material. All of these actions and reactions pertain to material objects, but the soul is not material. So we're fearful because we've forgotten that, and we think, this body. So as soon as we think that, fear becomes our constant companion, because at any moment something could happen to this body. In the Vedas, there's one famous verse in the Vedas which says that there's danger at every step. At every step in our life, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what waits around the corner. We don't know if suddenly we're taken from this body. It can happen. But in the back of our mind, that's always there, that nagging fear that may happen. So fearfulness is our condition when we're in ignorance of our real self, of our true nature. So this is another thing which Srimad Bhagavatam can destroy simply by hearing it. And the third thing, moha, illusion. Illusion means to accept something to be different, to be something it's not. So illusion means that we accept this world to be a place of happiness, to be a place of permanence, a place where I belong, but actually we don't. It's not permanent, it's not happy, and we don't belong here. We belong with Krishna. Bhagavad Gita says there is another nature which is unchanging, which is eternal, which is blissful, and which is not destroyed when this world is destroyed. Actually, this world, the Vedas explain that periodically it's annihilated, that it comes and goes. The Vedic time is cyclical. It explains that there are ages which come and go. But the abode of God, where we belong, is permanent. It's never destroyed. So illusion means that we accept this temporary miserable world to be the permanent blissful abode where we actually belong, and where we're trying to get back to. We're constantly trying for that. All our endeavors are aimed at these things. Security, we're trying to achieve permanence. Bliss, we want to be happy. Knowledge, we want to know what's going on. Why do we buy the newspapers? Why do we look online? Why do we watch the news? Now we're bombarded with knowledge, with information, because we're so thirsty for it. Because that's our nature. We're eternal, we're blissful, and we're full of knowledge by nature, because that's God's nature, and we partake of that nature. So because of our forgetfulness, our ignorance, the covering of this material world, we forget that, but we're trying to get back to it. But we're trying in the wrong way. So Srimad Bhagavatam is showing us how we can revert back to that original nature, how we can again achieve that. And it's very easy, simply by hearing that literature, it says. Simply by hearing this Vedic literature, one's relationship with God awakens at once to extinguish the fire of lamentation, illusion, and fearfulness. So, with that in mind, we've been trying to present the book, because Srimad Bhagavatam is quite a large literature, has 12 cantos, so it's difficult to tackle it. It's full of Sanskrit verses, so my wife is going to speak about a little bit now, and perhaps read a little bit. What I thought I'd do is pause there and let her speak, and then after that we can maybe discuss, and if you have any questions or anything, then we can discuss that. So I'll let her speak a bit now about what we're trying to do.
I'll just check. What time do we go on to, Mantra?
Till about 3:30, roughly there, yeah.
So you've got around half an hour.
Yeah, yeah. You can, a little longer if you everyone's happy, yeah.
Fantastic. So, Hare Krishna, I'm Chintamani. Before I speak, can I just ask, who's here for the very first time? There's quite a lot of people here for the very first time. So, everyone else. And okay, thank you. So there was a few things that my husband said I would just like to clarify a little bit on. He was talking about how Vyasadeva wrote the Vedas, compiled it, so we could know who we are. And that's the main message. And as he was speaking, I was thinking, if this was my first time, I'd be thinking, so many books just to explain that I'm not this body, but I'm a spirit soul. Wow, that's a lot of books to say that one point. But, so I just wanted to speak a little bit about that. Our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, there's a painting of him there. He brought this knowledge from India. His spiritual master told him to bring it. And he would often give this example of, if you start with the wrong axiom in life, if you start, for example, if you're doing a very complicated mathematical equation, and you start with the wrong axiom, 1 + 1 = 3, it doesn't matter how excellent and complicated the rest of the equation is, your answer is going to be wrong. So we've created a very complex society and civilization in the pursuit of happiness, but we're starting with the wrong axiom. And he was explaining what that wrong axiom is: I am this body. And because we start with the wrong axiom, we create huge slaughterhouses, we deforest rainforests, we just pollute our oceans, we pollute our rivers, and everything else, because we just focused on trying to create immediate satisfaction for the body. But it's a false axiom. And so instead of people becoming more and more peaceful, more and more connected, and more enlivened, we feel more and more disconnected, more and more anxious, more and more disturbed, because we started with the wrong axiom. So he was saying how Vyasadeva wrote several books, the Mahabharata, and then the Bhagavatam and Puranas. And as he was speaking, I was thinking to myself, if this was my first time, and I'd be wondering, well, what's the difference between Mahabharata and the Bhagavatam? We've got copies of both of them there. And I just wanted to speak a little bit about that, if I may. The Mahabharata is the story of a dynasty which is split into two. It's the story of a dynasty where some of the people in the dynasty are very atheistic, very materialistic. They have the modern day conception of life. I am this body, and happiness comes through the gratification of my senses. By hook or by crook, I will get what I want. That's their ethos. And then you have the other side of the family, who have the world view, the paradigm of the Vedas, that I'm not this body, and my happiness I'm an eternal spirit soul, an eternal part of God, and my happiness depends on my satisfying the Supreme. So they act very righteously, always keeping themselves in line with virtue, whereas the other side of the family is like, by hook or by crook, I will get what I want. And there's a great conflict that takes place between them. And as one might imagine, the side which is acting virtuously, virtue sometimes gets kicked around a lot. They get exploited a lot. But in the end, and this is true history that occurred, in the end, they prevail. So the Mahabharata is trying to teach people who may even want material happiness, even if you want material happiness in this world, even if you want to achieve in this world, align yourself with truth. Don't start with the wrong paradigm, the way one side of the family does. Don't think by hook or by crook, I can get what I want in this world. Because the world is done, there's unseen laws, just like there's the unseen law of gravity, there are other unseen forces and other unseen laws, the law of karma. So we can't just blatantly ignore these laws and think we'll get what we want in this world even. Whereas if we align ourselves with the laws of God, we can be happy even in this world. So the Mahabharata is trying to change people's worldview by dangling with them, even if you want to succeed in this world, like the Pandavas. Try to align yourself with truth. Start with the right premise, 1 + 1 = 2. The premise, I am not this body, I'm an eternal part of God, and I have to align myself with God's laws. The Bhagavatam goes another step. The Bhagavatam is trying to awaken our awareness of God in every area of our life, and ultimately to awaken our love for Him. The Bhagavatam is trying to change our paradigm completely, so we're not even trying to seek pleasure through in this temporary world, but we become aware of a much greater pleasure that we can access through the knowledge that's given to us in the Bhagavatam. So those were some of the thoughts that came to my mind as my husband was speaking, that I just wanted to kind of like fill in a little bit, you know. So we'll have a little more time to speak, yes? Okay. So we have, as my husband said, there's 12 cantos. The original Bhagavatam, which maybe some of you here, has anyone here read Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavatam? Anyone? Yeah. Wonderful. Anyone else? With the devotees from Rochester? No. Okay. So if anyone's even looked at it, it is quite complicated. Prabhupada is a great scholar and a great saint, and he's got the Sanskrit, he's got the verb, and it can be a little daunting. So we have novelized them. This is the entire first canto in a novel form. And this is the second canto, Mysteries of Creation, Stages of Naimisharanya. The Bhagavatam is stories within stories. So the first canto introduces the very first conversation, which is between great sages who've come to a place, Naimisharanya. They, like yesterday, could see what would happen in the future. The massive animal slaughter, abortions, you know, they could foresee what was happening in Syria, Iraq, Kuwait, and they could see that this would take over the world. People would be running from one side from their governments, on the other side from dacoits and terrorists, and they were thinking, how can we help these people? So this is a conversation between them, and it sets up the Bhagavatam. It begins to introduce that the Bhagavatam can help these people. The Bhagavatam can help them to rise right above the suffering that's coming because of the wrong paradigm and the wrong pursuit of happiness. And they introduce another conversation, which is first introduced in the second canto. The second canto, Mysteries of Creation, is a conversation between a great king and a sage. This king was cursed to die in 7 days, and he was a great devotee. So a mystical sage called Sutta, who normally didn't mix in society, came just to speak to him. And the king asked him a very important question. He said, what is the highest duty of a person approaching death? What is the solution to all suffering? So Sutta begins to give him knowledge that can help anyone transcend even the fear of death. The knowledge basically is, in these first 2 cantos, learning to see God everywhere. This second canto is very, very scientific. It gives us this Vedic story of creation, and it addresses a lot of the kinds of doubts that people have. If there's an all-good God, why is there suffering? All these doubts are brought up and addressed in this canto, and the conversation is set up in this canto. We also have the third canto, part 1, but it's only just been released. It's on Amazon. We weren't able to get any to bring in with us today. So I can pause a little bit before I do a reading and just see if anyone would you like to. Should I just go straight into the reading, or would you like to pause and anyone?
Does anyone have any questions or
any comments?
Carry on.
Carry on. Okay then.
Did you?
I'm just going to ask if you translated directly from Sanskrit.
No. We use Prabhupada's translations.
What we have done is we've given the context and we've novelized it. Because when you're reading the original Bhagavatam, if you're not familiar with the culture and the philosophical context of their conversation, it can be very bewildering. But we, through the story and through novelizing it, we've put the conversation into so that you can be in their mind, you can understand the cultural and philosophical context of the age. So sometimes the questions and the dialogue then will make more sense. So we've tried to do it so that you can actually, it's almost like a cinema, that you can enter in there and see what's going on and feel it. And that way the conversation and the knowledge will hopefully make more sense. So I'll just read a little bit from this one chapter. This is, my husband spoke about Narad and Vyasadeva, and Narad, Vyasadev's spiritual master, encouraged him to write the Bhagavatam. He said, you've written the Mahabharata and the Vedas, but in these books you've tried to encourage people to lead a more virtuous and spiritually aligned life by tempting them with material goals. So it's not being purely spiritual. And he said they'll forget the spiritual part. They'll just go for the material goals. You know, if you tell someone who's smoking 60 cigarettes a day, just smoke one a day, they'll forget the fact they're meant to give up. They're just attached to smoking one a day or whatever. So he's saying, forget that. They're just going to be attached to the materialism. Give them the pure knowledge of God, because that will attract their hearts, and they'll begin to become attracted to a higher reality. So, and then he tells them about his own story. Narad tells him how he first heard the Bhagavatam, and he tells him about his previous life. Before he became this great mystic saint, sage who can travel the universe, before that he was the son of a maidservant. And he says, in that birth I had the good fortune of hearing the Bhagavatam, and that Bhagavatam transformed me. In that life I achieved complete perfection, and now I'm this personality. So I'll read a little bit from that section, and you can see how we've novelized it. So there's actually 2 chapters that I'll bring it. Sorry, got to the wrong chapter. Okay. Mother, the small child called plaintively, I am hungry. His thin, poorly dressed mother looked compassionately at him. How unfortunate he was to have been born to a maidservant. Her master was a Brahmin, to whose school many respectable families sent their children. These children were always well fed and clothed, and spent their time in study or leisure. Her poor child, however, was obliged to work all day. Looking tenderly at her scrawny boy, tears fell from her eyes. Are you hurt, mother? Shall I help you? She laughed at his innocence. I too am hungry, child. Let us quickly finish cleaning these pots, and then we can eat together. She gave her son a dishcloth, and as she washed the vessels, he dried them. When the chores were done, she took the food which had been left and prepared 2 plates. Come, child, she said, taking her son's small hand. Let us eat. They had barely finished their meal when her master arrived. She stood up quickly as the kindly-looking Brahmin entered the room. Sit down, he said. Finish your meal. Thank you, sir, but I have finished now. How may I serve you? 4 traveling ascetics have arrived, he announced. I have invited them to stay here during the rainy season. Would you like to serve them this year? He asked. He always gave the servants a chance to attend holy men who arrived. In this and other ways, he tried to help them attain a better destiny in their future lives. The woman folded her palms and thanked him. I would be honored for such an opportunity. Very well, but remember they are monks, he said. They do not like to be too close to women. You can get your son to directly serve their meals while you cook and clean. For the next 4 months, the child waited upon the 4 elderly Brahmins. After serving their food, he would sit nearby as they ate, in case they wanted anything, and while doing so, he would hear their conversations. The ascetics took a liking to the boy. He is very sober for such a young child, one remarked. Another asked him, What do you like to play? I don't play, sir, replied the boy innocently. I help my mother with her work. After a pause, the child added, but I enjoy listening to your stories. The men all laughed. Well, boy, said one of them, if you like, you can sit with us whenever we talk. Then you can hear more of our stories. I would like that very much, sir, said the child. But you must not interrupt or make a noise, warned the ascetic. No, sir, I promise to be good. From that day, if the boy was ever absent when the saints were talking, they would ask his master, where is the lad? Please send him here. Seeing the attachment the holy men had for the child, the master told his mother to excuse him from any other chores. He should remain with them as much as possible. They seem to like him, he said, patting the boy's head. On one occasion, as the ascetics spoke, one of them mentioned that to eat the remnants of saints brings about great good fortune. Hearing this, the boy wondered if he could receive any of their food. He would have to ask them for a portion, as they only ate small amounts and never left anything on their plates. That afternoon, after serving their meal, he got up the courage and meekly said, This morning you explained that it brings great fortune to eat the food left by saintly persons. Yes, replied the ascetics, surprised that he had been listening so attentively. Blushing, the boy asked, May I eat some of your remnants? The four saints' hearts melted on seeing the child's simple faith. Yes, boy, they replied. We will give you some, but we can only do it once, as really it is against our regulative principles. The boy held out his right hand, and they each placed a morsel of rice in it. As he placed their remnants in his mouth, he felt a deep peace pervade his heart. His eagerness to learn from the saints intensified. He continued to listen attentively to all their discourses, because they told him it is good to repeat what he had heard. In the evenings, he would explain everything to his tired and sleepy mother. Gradually, his taste for hearing increased until his mind was absorbed in their teachings. They trained him in their other spiritual practices, such as chanting the Lord's holy names and worshipping his form. Step by step, he became free of material contamination, and in due course he realized that he was not actually a poor boy. Rather, he was a spiritual being, a fragmental part of the Lord, qualitatively the same as him. During the 4 months they stayed at the Brahmin school, the saints instructed him in all the confidential truths of Bhakti Yoga, known as the Srimad Bhagavatam. How will I continue with my devotional service when you have left? The boy inquired. I will be obliged to again serve and associate with materialistic men, and I may fall from the path of pure devotion. The ascetics instructed him to do his duties as an offering for Krishna's pleasure. In that consciousness, your work will become devotional service to the Lord, and you will never again fall into ignorance or be entangled by the reactions of work. O holy ones, how can I offer my work to the Lord? Asked the child. Whilst doing your chores, which you should see as your God-given duty, simultaneously remember Krishna by meditating either on his name, activities, instructions, or qualities. In this way, the same work which binds one to material existence becomes the cause of liberation, and your transcendental knowledge will increase. Initiating him into a sacred mantra, the saints taught the boy how he could mentally worship the Lord's form. Dear child, always meditate on this mantra. I offer respect to Lord Krishna, along with his plenary expansions, Vasudeva, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Sankarshan. The boy diligently followed their instructions, confident that he would soon achieve spiritual perfection. Shall I read a little bit more? Yeah. So this is chapter 6. When the rainy season ended, would you like to read?
When the rainy season ended, the 4 ascetics departed. The boy continued assisting his mother, while always remembering Krishna as they had instructed him. He would rise early and worship the Lord in his mind, chanting the mantra they had taught him. Seeing his devotional inclinations, his mother did her best to give him time for his spiritual practices. She would work harder than all the other servants, so that her son need not do as much. Still, whenever her master would see the boy not working, he would give him jobs. So despite her best efforts, the woman was unable to do anything to help her son. Even so, the boy was not disturbed, because he knew everything happened by Krishna's divine arrangement. One night, the master wanted milk. "Send the lad to the cowsheds," he told the boy's mother. Not wanting to disturb her son, who was absorbed in meditation, she took the vessel and went out into the dark. As she walked by the scant moonlight, she accidentally stepped on a coiled snake, which immediately bit her. She screamed in pain and terror and stumbled back to her room. There she collapsed to the floor and writhed in agony in front of her alarmed son. "Snake! Snake!" she cried repeatedly. The boy ran over and knelt by his mother, frantically examining her to find the bite. The venom quickly coursed through her veins. Within a few minutes, the woman died as her son loudly chanted Krishna's name. The boy cradled his mother, stroking her forehead, trying to make sense of the night's events. Knowing that everything was under Krishna's control, the child tried to understand his will. As long as his mother lived, he would have stayed to assist her. The Lord, however, had taken his mother. He now had no reason to stay there in the association of materialists. Out of his causeless mercy, Krishna had freed him from all obligation. Unseen by anyone, the boy immediately walked out into the night, taking only a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Following the light of the pole star, which the 4 saints had once shown him, he headed toward the north, determined to become an ascetic. So that the master would not find him, he left the main path and walked through the dense jungle. That night, he curled up beneath a tree with his blanket around him and slept. By Krishna's arrangement, he was not troubled by wild animals, and the next day he continued his journey. Day after day, month after month, and year after year, the boy walked, surviving on fruits and wild roots, continuously chanting his mantra. Gradually, hunger and thirst no longer troubled him as he became fixed in spiritual consciousness. Occasionally, when he passed through a city or town, some kind person would offer him a cooked meal. The boy grew into a tall man. Still, he continued to roam about God's creation, just as his spiritual masters had done before him. He walked tirelessly through flourishing cities, towns, villages, farms, mines, agricultural lands, valleys, flower gardens and forests. When people saw the young bearded mendicant, they would come to hear spiritual discourses from him, and he would repeat for their benefit all he had heard from his own spiritual masters. As he grew older, he desired more solitude to practice meditation. Thus, he headed for the wilderness. He passed through mountains coloured by great veins of gold and silver, and large freshwater lakes with lotus flowers, beautified by bees and singing birds. Admiring the celestial beauty of his surroundings, he imagined he was in heaven. At other times, he entered dark, fearsome forests, dense with reeds and thorny bushes, and inhabited by snakes, owls, and baying jackals. When he felt exhausted, he would bathe in clear mountain lakes and drink their cool water. Feeling refreshed, he would sit under the shade of a tree and meditate on Krishna with feelings of ecstatic love, intoning his mantra, his eyes brimming with tears of longing to see the Lord. On one such occasion, as he sat under a banyan tree in an uninhabited forest, meditating on Krishna, the Lord appeared within his heart. He immediately began to haripalate, his mind overcome with ecstasy. Suddenly, the Lord's form disappeared. No longer seeing his beloved Lord, he became agitated with the grief of separation. He jumped up in distress like a person who has lost a great treasure. Krishna, Krishna, where have you gone? He repeatedly called as he searched the forest groves. When he could not find Krishna anywhere, he sat down again in meditation, desperate for another vision of his Lord. Not seeing Krishna even in his heart, he became agitated. Hot tears streamed down his cheeks. He felt dizzy and in confusion kept calling out, Krishna, Krishna, where are you? Why have you left me? Oh, my Lord, my Lord! To his wonderment, he heard an ethereal voice address him with affection. My dear devotee, I have revealed myself to you because of your sincere and determined practice. Never do I show myself to those careless in their worship. I appeared before you in order to increase your yearning for my eternal association. Such intense hankering for me destroys all material desire. As that longing intensifies, my devotee's pure love for me gradually deepens. The Lord told him the reason for his great good fortune was the training he had received from the 4 ascetics. He assured his devotee that if he continued to follow their instructions, he would become the Lord's associate in the transcendental world after leaving his body. A fear arose in the boy's heart. What if he should forget the Lord at the time of death? Understanding his anxiety, the Lord reassured him, whatever advancement you make will never be destroyed. Your transcendental knowledge and love for me will stay with you birth after birth until it finally matures. Then you will return to me. Feeling grateful, the saint bowed his head in obeisance. He then resumed his travels, chanting the Lord's glories without inhibition wherever he went. His mind was completely satisfied. He envied no one and had no pride. He thus spent the remainder of his life absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. Wherever he travelled, he spread the Lord's glories. He was free of all material attachments and aversions. When the allotted time of his death arrived, he instantaneously received an eternal, indestructible, spiritual body befitting an associate of the Lord.
So we're told that Narad heard this transcendental knowledge from the sages, but we're not told what it is, because what the knowledge it is in the rest of the Bhagavatam. He's just saying, I heard this knowledge. He's saying, yes, I heard it. And that's the knowledge I want you to give. So Canto 1 is setting it up and gives us a little background information, and Canto 2 begins giving us the knowledge. I think I already mentioned it. It gives the Vedic creation story, which is very scientific, and it addresses a lot of atheistic doubts. So this is where the knowledge begins, and this is setting it up. So I think we'll pause here. We'll see.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions or confusions or points from the readings or anything? Does God have any gender?
Yeah.
I'll let her answer that.
Can I just ask your name again?
It's Nicole.
Nicole.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a good point you raise, actually, and you're taking it right to an esoteric level now. That is God male? The Christians have always depicted God as male, and that can be very like, why should God be male? What about the rest of us? What about the women who we made in the image of? You know. And according to the Vedas and the Bhagavatam, God is both male and female, but this is very esoteric knowledge. God is Radha Krishna. I don't know if you've heard of Radha Krishna. Radha Krishna, the pleasure potency of God himself, takes the feminine form as Radha. And in the spiritual abode, even the male form of God worships the female form of God, the pleasure potency. But this is becoming very esoteric. The God who is the creator, and even when he's the creator, there's always the feminine side, Mother Earth. He creates as the male progenitor, but Mother Earth is also an expansion of his divine energy. So in his power, God the powerful, God the controller, God the ruler, he's depicted as male. But as we enter more into the Bhagavatam, and we understand the deeper truths about God, we realize that God, the beloved, there is the beloved and the love, and there is the male and female very much, and the female form of God becomes very prominent. But you're going to the esoteric now.
It makes sense.
Yeah. Do you think it's a cultural thing then, that it's a little boy that's chosen? Because I was kind of thinking as well, you know, it's really lovely and a really lovely story, but again, the mum's in the kitchen and it's a boy child, you know, going to the male stages. Again, it's...
The Bhagavatam does have stories about women, very much. I could have chosen you one about Kunti and Draupadi, Kunti in here. That story according to the Bhagavatam, is a history. So Narad is telling his history. And yes, culturally, women, there was division of labor. You know, the division of labor of the culture is not the essential teaching. The essential teaching is the spiritual teaching. Because in one life I'm a woman, and as my husband said, when in 50 years' time, I don't think I'm going to live more than 50 years, if that, you know.
I don't know, you look very well.
Pardon?
I said you look very well.
I may not be in a woman's body. I might be in a man's body or some other body. So, you know, in this life you're in a male body, in the next life we're in a female body. So though there are cultural, you know, the Vedas talks about, you know, we have our roles in society. That's not the main message. The main message is you're not this role. It's just a part you're playing. And there are sections as we set it up. There's a chapter here about Queen Kunti, and she's a great devotee in the Bhagavatam, and her relationship with Krishna is very intimate. She's his aunt. So I could have read you that section where the woman would have been the main, and we just chose that particular chapter.
I've got another question. What is the reason that in different religions ladies pray in one side, men in one side? Sometimes I go into mosque, I pray with Muslims. Sometimes I am in Hare Krishna and I see the same thing. We are not different. I see us as having the same soul. Yesterday I had a conversation with a Muslim brother. And I said to him, I'm not even different than Ant. Maybe my consciousness is more developed than Ant. So you cannot perceive woman as a lower or something, because they are the same like we. But my question is, why we in some way separate? Why religions separate us?
Why is there segregation
Yes.
of the sexes
Yes, yes.
in places of worship?
Yes, it is just desire way or whatever, or why is like that? My question is like that. Why the separation?
Yeah, and in temples also you'll find that. Yes, in India it's part of the culture, and in Muslim mosques. Yeah,
Yes.
correct. Yeah, I mean what I understand is that it's true we're not the body, we're souls, and we're different. We're not different, you know, from each other. But when we're in material consciousness, we may get disturbed by the externals. You know, so in order just to focus on the worship and not become distracted by other things, because men and women tend to be attracted to each other.
It's like all girls' school and all boys' school.
You know, so I mean, actually, you find often in temples that like I know where I go back to Vedanta Manor, and a lot of the services, they're all mixed up. You know, the people
Sometimes,
are, but in the morning worship, when the more serious practitioners are present, you do find there is segregation like that. But as I understand it, it's just so that you can have a peaceful mind to get on with the spiritual worship without, you know, your mind being distracted by things it tends to be distracted by in the normal course of events. You know, I don't know if you've got anything you want to add to that.
No, not
I
really.
think that's it, really.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But it's not about discrimination. It's for the good of everyone present.
Yeah.
You know, so that's all. Anything else? Anyone? Yeah, I mean, I'll say something. The soul, yes. When you die, only the body dies, but you as a person continue, according to the Bhagavad Gita, into another body, depending on what you've done in this life. You know, the work that you've performed will determine your destination after death. So you can, you know, as I was saying earlier, you can perceive the changes in your body. Death is a change. It's the final change the body undergoes. But it's nevertheless still just a change of which you will remain conscious. You're conscious of all the changes in your body. You'll also be conscious of death. It's not that you cease to exist at that point, but then according to your karma, according to your work, karma means your work, so that will take you to the next place. So you don't choose where you're going to go, but you do choose. You're choosing now. We're all choosing now in what we're doing at this point in our life. At every moment is determining our next life.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
I'd like to add also to that, to what my husband was saying, because he was saying our next destination is determined by our works in this life. And it's work and desire. Work and desire. So it's what we're attracted to as well as what we deserve. Both things determine our next life. Once someone gave me a really nice example to help me grasp this point, and I'll share the example with you. Let's say I really like pink, I like wearing pink, let's say. So if I have a lot of money in my bank account, I can go to Zara's or someplace like that and buy pink there. And if I don't have a lot of money in my bank account, I go to Primark's. So the clothes I wear will be determined by my desire, my taste, and also by what I can afford. So similarly, our next life. Our next life is determined by the kind of the things that the taste we've cultivated in this life. So if I've cultivated a taste for voracious eating, depending on what I deserve, I may either get a pig's body or a divine body or a human body that will facilitate that. So both desire and deserve. And one of the things about the spiritual tradition is to change our desire. Because the more we hear about the divine and we become attracted to that, then the more we desire something higher. Because right now we desire things which aren't necessarily going to lead us to a good destination. So a very nice point. You're saying sometimes we hear this, that we kind of like need to learn a certain lesson. Sometimes we hear that we choose the lesson we want to learn. Is that I don't know if that's the theory, that we choose the lesson we want to learn, or maybe some other divine being chooses the lesson that we need to learn, and we take birth in order to learn that lesson. And so is that am I understanding you correctly? My understanding is a little bit like that. There's a verse in the Vedas, and I'm, sorry if my mind's a little scattered as I try to answer it, that one who's being pricked by pins, there's this verse that says, one who's being pricked by pins will never again prick others by pins. So when I have a life of power, where I have dominance over you, like I have right now, I have power over animals, I can choose to buy their corpses and eat them. I have power over them. As a human being, I have some. So if I choose to use my strength and power and dominance to hurt those who are helpless and in my care, then I will need to be pricked by that same pin. And being pricked by that pin over many lives leaves an impression on the soul. We can't remember our past lives, but some people are naturally averse to eating animals. Some people are naturally averse to any kind of cruelty. It's because they may have done that in a previous life. We've all here in this material world because we want to lord it over. We want to pretend we're God, according to the Vedas at least. And we've done it. And then we've had to suffer the consequence. We've maybe been many lives when we've been on the receiving end. And now in this life, it's left an impression on us. We think, never again do I want to hurt another living being. Never again do I want to eat another animal, or abort another child, or cheat another living being, or murder someone, or steal from them, because I've been on the receiving end. and it's left an impression on me. So in that sense, it leaves an impression that don't do to others what you wouldn't want done unto you. And if you're going to do it, it will be done to you until you get free of that tendency. I don't know if that satisfied you. Yeah? I think Christ's was probably don't do unto others as you would have done unto you. That is the highest material law. You can do unto others what you would like done unto you, but there's a higher spiritual law even. Develop your love of God. I was saying that it's your desire and your desert. You say, well, that sounds a little discriminatory. It's like, well, you've been born in a good family, you deserve to go to Eton, and you've been born in a bad family, you can just go to, whatever. So it sounds a little bit like, people are. Did I understand you correctly? The desert isn't done on that basis. It's done on the basis of what we've done. So if in this life, I've helped others, then that creates kind of like a pious bank account, that I will get a good destination according to my desires. And in this life, I've exploited, hurt, and caused general pain and havoc in the lives of others. Then I lack piety. I have impiety. So I will have to experience the kind of pain and havoc that I've caused to others. So in that sense, it's desert. It's not according to what body we have. It's not whether I'm a woman or poor or rich. That's not determining my deserts. It's my actions that determine my deserts. Does that satisfy you? So any one of us, a poor person, can be very, very impious, or maybe very, very pious. And a rich person may be very impious or very impious. It's not our social, economic, or gender, or anything like that determines future destiny. It's our acts.
So the act itself, it's really about your selfishness. That you're not so much concerned for the person.
Yeah.
Like you can experience that in your job, for example.
Yes.
You're saying so.
So, because
Or
I'm
up to
helping.
today, someone might stop eating animals because they just don't want to become a pig in the next life.
Right. Well, that's a good start. It's not very nice to be a pig.
Oh, how do you know that? Sometimes think they've got a great life.
Yeah.
Simple.
But this is a very good point you're making, actually,
Yeah.
that sincerity of purpose is important when you're acting and we're performing our spiritual activities with the desire to enjoy the result, to get the result, or to become free of our suffering. But that's where it begins, at least.
Okay.
I mean, you can't immediately be completely pure in your intentions. But the first thing is understanding what I should be doing, what I should not be doing. And that's what Vedic literatures and that explain to us. So start there, and I'm doing it with the desire that I don't want to suffer anymore, or I want to go to a better place. I want to be happy, and it's about me. That's called enlightened self-interest, and it begins there, and that's okay. And if you continue with those practices, the sincerity will come. It will develop. You become purified. It's explained in the Vedas that the heart becomes purified gradually by the practices, by the chanting, which we're about to do again. That's
What does that actually mean?
one of the best ways to purify the heart. Sorry?
What does that actually mean? That's just
It's
saying
a
his
prayer.
name over
It's a
and
prayer,
over.
yeah. It's praying to God, my dear Lord, please connect me with you. Please help me to come closer to you.
Okay.
It is God's name. It's
Just
like
Yeah.
a child calling to mum. Mum! Mum!
Oh.
It's like Krishna,
Bring me back.
Krishna.
Oh, save me. It's kind of like that. It is a prayer.
May I also say something on your point? It was such an interesting point you raised.
Sorry.
That we can sometimes do the
Stop
right
it.
thing for the wrong reason. So do you want
No,
us to stop?
please.
This idea that we can do the right thing but for the wrong reason, for a completely selfish reason, So in a roundabout way, I'd like to just shed some thoughts on that. According to the Vedas, the soul is pleasure seeking. That is our nature. The soul is pleasure seeking. The real pleasure of the soul in its pure state comes through love. Love is selfless. Love means I get pleasure just by giving you happiness, not because I want anything in return. And that real love, that love which totally fulfills the soul, is between the soul and God, Krishna. Krishna's a person. That when we can reawaken our love, which through hearing about him through Bhagavatam, that's what Nara said to Vyasadeva, Mahabharata is about enlightened self-interest. If you want to be happy even in this world, learn that impiety will not bring you happy. Bhagavatam takes you the next step higher. We're pleasure-seeking, but we have to realize that pleasure will come when the soul's inherent love for God is reawoken. Because at that stage, we go through a complete paradigm shift. We go past enlightened self-interest. We go to the place of selfless action. Action which is motivated simply by love. But until that love is awakened, the best we can do is enlightened self-interest. I want to be happy. I'm not going to be happy by exploiting you. I'm not going to be happy by exploiting any living being. And that's where unenlightened materialists get it wrong. I think I can be happy by bombing you. I think I can be happy by hurting you. And the Vedas start with stop. You're not going to be happy. It'll come back to you tenfold, 50-fold. Don't do that. So at some place we have to stop people from the kind of like mad, self-destructive path we've taken. By hook or by crook, I will get what I want. No, you won't get what you want. You'll just fall in the mud and hurt yourself. So it starts like that. It's not the highest stage. A higher stage, but as my husband said, through spiritual practices, through hearing, through chanting, through prayer, we gradually, hopefully, we desire to come to that higher stage, where it's no longer about me, it's about love. But that doesn't happen overnight.
Thank you very much.
May I just, last thing before we go, for those of you who've been coming a lot and who do study Prabhupada's books, and who do read Gita, etc., we have a web page called Improving Our Sadhu Sangha, where we share the things that have most helped us in our own spiritual lives. We share them in very simple form with supportive videos, and we've left a little bookmark there for you with the web page address and little quotes to inspire you to visit it. So for those of you who've been coming more often and who are trying to seriously practice, please take one of these as well, they're free. Thank you.
Thank you. And after the program, if any of you want, there's some of our books at the back. You can have a look at those, and
There's other books too.
we'll be happy to sign copies as well. So we're going to do a little chanting now. Is that right?
If you want. A dance move. It's like a yoga. If you heard of yoga asana, this is the best yoga posture you can do. It brings the quickest enlightenment possible. It's quite special. So can everybody see Hema's stripy feet? Meditate on her lotus feet. So it's called the Swami. It's a new craze that's as old as the hills. Very timeless thing. And it's been going around for some time. And if you see on the left-hand side of the altar, a personality with his arms raised. The Swami is named after him. He's doing it in the picture. So the arms tend to go up when we get really, sometimes it gets a bit out of hand, so the arms can go up. Ollie knows how to do it. Yeah. So we can watch Hema's feet. It's simple. We just go left foot and then right foot. This is the Swami. Just gets us, gets us going. So we can start with this and we'll chant the same mantra as before, and then you can follow our lead. Is that okay? Is that okay, everybody? Yeah! Okay, great.
Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.